It just basically told me that I was a part-timer, that Jesus saved me, but I was just supposed to stay on the bench until the coach put me in on some key play, or if somebody walked into my office and grabbed me on the shirt and wanted to know about salvation, I could help them, but there wasn't anything else for me to do. And I discovered that there were plenty of things to do, but you have to kind of disassemble some of the baggage and the meanings that we put on words.
Marcus Aurelius said, "What we do in life echoes through eternity." What is your life echoing through eternity? Welcome to Echoes Through Eternity with Dr. Jeffrey Skinner. Our mission is to inspire, engage, and encourage leaders from across the globe to plant missional churches and be servant leaders. So join us and hear the stories of servant leaders reverberating lives as God echoes them through eternity. Brought to you by Missional Church Planting and Leadership Development and Dynamic Church Planting International.
Welcome into Echoes Through Eternity. I am your host, Dr. Jeffery D. Skinner. I am joined in the studio today by Mr. Mike Henry Sr. He and I connected on LinkedIn, and I saw his ministry, Follower of One. It's just, I love the story he has there, and which is essentially that you are a missionary. And I'll let him talk all about that and tell you all about that. But welcome in, Mike. It's good to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. This is a blast.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Follower of One and what that does, what your ministry is there.
So the ministry basically is an online community designed to help marketplace Christians integrate their faith into what they do every day. And it kind of came out of this idea that several ideas that have happened in my career, but I became a Christian when I was already in the workforce. And it seemed like almost everything the church wanted me to do was something that made me leave work, or I had to get away from work to do it. And I felt like it seemed strange to save me and then put me in a position where I can't do anything. And so I started asking God for ideas about what I could do, and realized that there's so many things that we can be doing, but we think if we're not doing the church things, then we're not doing the right things. And all that kind of led into a 30-year journey that resulted in Follower of One.
That's great. That's great. And you're right. I mean, I told you before we started, I have a church planting background. And so this podcast kind of serves kind of three purposes. I want to primarily echo the voices of people like yourself and, reverberate those. And it's called Echoes Through Eternity, in that Marcus Aurelius was famous for saying, what you do today will echo through eternity. And so often the message that we clergy give to the parishioner, to the laity, which, by the way, is not a separation between professional clergy and the people. It just literally means the work of the people is what it's talking about there. And so I hope that clergy are people. I hope I'm a person. Everybody is people. And so when we're talking about laity, it wasn't designed to say, okay, here's the people and your job is basically sit in the pew and receive. And then if there's anything to do, they want you to come to the church, and we want you to do it at the church or within the church. And so this idea of the church becoming the center of all ministry was not even what Jesus did. Jesus did not begin his work in the temple. In fact, very little of his ministry took place in the temple. It was the temple that rejected Jesus' work and Jesus' message. It was the temple essentially that crucified Jesus, if you want to say it that way. Not the people, Now they had a little crowd there in the end that whipped up into a frenzy, and they could say it was the work of the people, so to speak. But you and I know, how that goes, right? So I love, but that's why I invited you on. I love your message at Follower of One, and it's not about you. You're not the hero of that story. It's the individuals there. It's all about them finding their purpose and connecting that with God. And we spend more 40 hours a week at the very least at work. And so if everything centers around the church, it's going to be very little time for ministry for you. It's going to happen on a Saturday. You're probably already exhausted and we say 40 hours. If you're working in a job, we all know it's probably more than 40 hours. I have a wife as a school teacher. She works a lot more than 40 hours a week. So anyway,
That's
I love your message. I love what you're doing there. And so you're right. So tell us how you said it was born out of that conversation with God. How long after you were saved how long did it take you to kind of discern that call in your life?
Well, I almost felt like I was adversarial with many of my pastors
Mm,
during my 40-year career. It's been over 40 years since I exited college.
wow.
And but I didn't become a Christian until I was 30. And all of my early challenges were when I would ask my pastors about different ideas that I had or what I wanted to learn. The answer was, sure, come back out to the church, come back out to the suburbs. I traveled quite a distance to work. I worked in industrial businesses early in my career and then in big office buildings later in my career. And nothing was ever close to where I lived. And I felt like because I couldn't get back out to the suburbs, that my kind of best case scenario was to just stay out of trouble until Sunday. And, I would even, because this dates me, but going back, often people would use the term called into full-time ministry. And it just basically told me that I was a part-timer, that Jesus saved me, but I was just supposed to stay on the bench until the coach put me in on some key play, or if somebody walked into my office and grabbed me on the shirt and wanted to know about salvation, I could help them, but there wasn't anything else for me to do. And I discovered that there were plenty of things to do, but you have to kind of disassemble some of the baggage and the meanings that we put on words.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost like I'll use the term mercenary missionaries. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have essentially, and I don't think we did it on purpose, but just accidentally we communicated to the parishioner, your job essentially to fund the ministry. And so you pay us to or pay others to do the ministry for you. So it's kind of a mercenary missionary force there. And if we're to do ministry, we're going to take a vacation. We're going to go somewhere overseas. You're going to go to Haiti, or we're going to go to the Dominican Republic, or we're going to go to some other, place that we perceive that needs Jesus, so to speak. And I'm telling you that there's a lot of folks here in America that need Jesus. And that's not to necessarily say mission trips are bad. Mission trips can be a very formative experience. The difficulty with that is that when we do that as with our children and our teens, and even adults to a certain extent, as they begin to be the mentors and the chaperones for these trips, is we accidentally communicate that missions happens somewhere else. Missions is not happening here at home. A huge mission field, as you point out, is our workplace. So talk a little bit about what does that look like? I know you have it on your website. And you also have a podcast, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, but says you are a missionary. See how easy it is to follow Jesus at your place of work. So how
Mm-hmm.
does that work?
Well, and so we actually practice what we call 5 daily habits. And really, there are 6. I've since decided there are 6. But the 5 that we talk about that we do every day are pray, appreciate others, know what we believe, serve others, and speak for ourselves.
Yeah, that's good. And wow, what a powerful message there, because I think too often, uh, at least today in this divisive culture that we live in, it's almost like we're demanding that somehow people bow the knee to Jesus before they ever accept Jesus as their savior, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then we've reduced that to saying a prayer. And so people
Mhm.
say that prayer, Jesus, come into my heart, whatever it looks like for them, pray the sinner's
Mhm.
prayer, or the ABC, accept, believe, and what was the C? Confess, accept, believe, confess. And so we reduced salvation to that. So now I've got my get out of hell free card. And I'm a Christian, but there's nothing that connects us with that. So I love that. It starts with prayer. I love the idea of serving and appreciating our neighbor. Look, I
Mhm.
can appreciate anybody. I can find almost with anybody. I don't believe that anybody is beyond redemption. I don't.
Well, yeah, we even don't kind of specialize. I had to realize, because when I first became a Christian, I would ask Jesus to put me into ministry. And
Yeah.
I use the air quotes often when I do that, because I would say, okay, Jesus, I want to be a minister. I'd like to be a full-time
Yeah.
minister. And it always seemed like the answer I was getting was, okay, Mike, you're a minister now, get back to work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
Because when I looked at the Greek words, right, and I'm no scholar, I don't have
Mhm.
an advanced degree in any of this, but it's the same Greek word is often translated servant or minister or deacon.
Yeah.
And I noticed that even in Mark 10:45, where Jesus said that he didn't come to be served, but he came to serve
Mhm.
and to give his life for others. And that Greek word is translated minister in a lot of other places. And so I started thinking, well, what if ministry and what if the whole disciple making process isn't really this big continuum? And we all have this command in James, we're commanded to draw near to God.
Mhm.
And if I'm on this big continuum, then wherever I am, I can always be a little nearer.
Yeah.
And so I kind of redefined ministry for me as helping people move one notch closer to Jesus.
That's
And I
great.
can help anybody do that. They
Yeah.
can be believers. I can help my pastor. I can help anyone. I spoke last week with a pastor, and we were talking about this thing we do called a marketplace mission trip. And he goes, well, my workplace is pretty much all believers. And I said, yeah, but you got to think about two other things. One, everybody could use to be one notch closer to Jesus if you go with that definition. And the second one is, even when I'm not at work, generally I'm in someone else's workplace. And so there's always opportunities for me to help other people move one notch closer to Jesus. And that, using that definition of ministry, I became a full-time minister.
Yeah. I love that. Interesting you talk about that, and you may be familiar with it and you may not. About 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, I heard a theologian talking. It was I'm a Church of the Nazarene. I'm an elder in the
Mm-hmm.
Church of the Nazarene. I've been ordained and planted churches for 15 years. And we were at an event that happens once every 4 years. It's called General Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a preacher there by the name of T. Scott Daniels, who is now just elected this past year to be one of our generals. We have, I think it's 4 or 5 generals of the Church of the Nazarene that
Mm-hmm.
serve. And he talked about this thing. He really didn't even name it at the time. I had to do the research on my own,
Mm-hmm.
and come to find out it was called center set theology. And so, but he told the story, basically a parable of these farmers out in, I think it was in the outback somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, these guys here in America heard about these farmers out in the outback who had no fences for their livestock, their sheep, no fences for any of that stuff, but they never ran away. And so these guys just were fascinated with the idea because they kept fencing everybody, all these animals in, and they're like, the idea was that we got to keep them fenced in or they're going to run away. So they went out and talked to these guys, and they said, we're just kind of curious. We noticed there's no fences here. We came to see it. How do you keep your animals here? How do you keep the livestock on here? How do you keep them run away? And they said, well, it's simple. We discovered that if we just dig our wells deep enough, it provides them water that's fresh enough, and they're never going to wander far from home. It seems like the church has kind of bought into this idea of basically bounded set theology, which essentially says we're the gatekeeper, and so we're going to surround everybody by a fence, and we'll determine who comes in and who goes out. And so that sounds more like a prison to me. The more I thought about it. It's just that you got to earn your way in. We somehow convinced everybody that you got to obey things and do things just the right way in order to get in. Centered set theology talks about digging deep wells, and it just says Jesus is the center of life. And the closer we are to Jesus, the more like him we look, the more we thrive in life. And so it becomes a measure not of who's in and who's out, but a measure of how close we are to the center, which is Jesus. And I loved that. I did. And so that's what you're talking about, just that relationship, that closeness. And it's not just a physical closeness, but that relational closeness, that emotional and intimacy. One of the things I think we have done in Western Christianity is kind of separated the soul from the body. And in the original, Greek, as you talk about, and even Hebrew, soul meant human. It was not a separate, this misty, ghost-like entity that dwells within us, but our spirit and our soul, it really had to do with our gut, just kind of that gut feeling. And when we talk about suffering or empathizing with people, even that word originates from a Near East definition of a word. There's no need in even pronouncing the word because it's a 1,000 miles long, but it just means to it relate to the warrior, the Middle East warrior. I mean, the Near East warrior that would rip their entrails out of honor, to suffer with is what it meant there. And so I love that we're entering in the workplace. We can enter into anyone's suffering. We can enter into anyone's story there. And I love that that's what you do. And so we're talking about pray. And then, obviously we know what that is, participate in, going before everything we do before we leave for work, even while we're at work, we think of praying as having to do this, special thing. But the Bible says, pray without ceasing, it's an attitude of
Exactly.
prayer and appreciating our bosses. I think so often today, our Christians can be a bad brand rep for the
Mhm.
name. And so we have this adversarial relationship with our bosses, and that's not what it's meant to be at all. So I
Well,
love
yeah,
that.
we actually talk about the key being to help other people feel appreciated,
That's good.
because just appreciating something doesn't really count
Yeah.
until they feel it, until they know that we appreciate them. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. That's good. And then you say, know what you believe. I think that speaks to identity, right?
Well, so actually, know what you believe is practicing a 1 or 2 sentence explanation
Okay.
that kind of explains that you're doing what you're doing because you follow Jesus. And we base that on the story of the man in Mark chapter 5 who had a legion of demons in him. And Jesus made the legion of demons go into the herd of pigs. The pigs rushed down the cliff and go into the lake and drowned. This is in Mark 5 1 through 20. And in verse 19, the people asked Jesus to leave that area. And the man asks Jesus if he can go with him. And Jesus said, no, you stay here and you go tell the people, you go back to your people and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. And so we encourage people to prepare and get ready to answer the question. Typically, the question that we get will be, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And we can explain that by saying that we're doing this because we're Jesus followers. And if you just however you say that using your words is the right answer,
Good.
because then they know that your motives weren't to kind of climb over them on the org chart. It's not trying to do something outside of the ordinary. I'm just serving them because I'm a Jesus follower.
Yeah. That's
And
good.
now they have this new fact that they have to reconcile in their own brain. Or you will learn that they're a believer and they'll join you in the conversation and maybe even in the practice and start appreciating people in the same workplace. And then you gain leverage.
That's good. Yeah, and I love the fact that you say, and however you say that. So you're not asking them to memorize a script.
No.
You're not asking them to memorize a formula for leading them to Jesus. You're just asking them to kind of be who they are and know what they believe, reconcile that within themselves. And then they root that in, I'm a Christ follower.
And not fumble through the answer, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be very natural. I've thought about this. This is why I did it. And it becomes very natural.
Yeah, that's good. I was talking with a mutual friend of ours on LinkedIn, Scott Kokenauer,
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. He coaches people in the fourth quarter of their life and kind of does a similar thing to you, but a little bit different way. He does it less in the workplace and has coaching them individually.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it, when you listen to what he has to say, is just kind of accepting where you are in life and not striving as much, but simply serving, whatever your purpose is and what God's called you to do. But one of the things he said was he was talking to another friend of his, and the guy put on his bio that his personal pronoun was Christ follower.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
a good
thought
one.
that's pretty good. I like that. So he said, I
Mhm.
adopted that. I put that as my personal pronoun on my LinkedIn profile now. So what a great conversation started in the workplace there,
Yeah.
and somebody says, oh, personal pronouns they, them, or my personal
Mhm.
pronouns he, him, or her, she, or
Mhm.
whatever. Not Hershey, but her. I'm not a
Yeah,
chocolate bar. I guess you
it's
can identify as a chocolate bar if you want to.
that thing's
But
a
anyway,
no-winner.
you say, oh, yeah, I identify as a follower of Christ. And so, what
Yeah,
a great conversation over there. Love that. So, you got a podcast. Tell us the name of the podcast. It's Follower of One. Obviously, I'm sure it's found in wherever podcasts are found out
right.
there. So, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, so it started off as I wanted to do two things. One is encourage people as they go to work or on their
Mm-hmm.
way to work. And so we have a 5-minute daily devotional kind of podcast where I take a Bible verse and talk about it a little bit and try and tie it into some application or encouragement for today. I try and use the word today at the 4-minute mark in that podcast and encourage people to take some action today based on who they are. And then we also have these longer episodes, about one a week. We sometimes it's a little more and sometimes a little less. But just interviewing people who are in the market trying to do something with their faith, talking about what they've done. We interview a lot of people who have taken our marketplace mission trip. And so we kind of kill two birds with one stone in some regard by getting them to talk about the marketplace mission trip a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
share with others how that impacted their uh, use of their faith or the way they activate their faith in the workplace. So those are the primary things that we do on the podcast. I love to interview people just like this.
Mm-hmm.
I love to have the conversations,
Yeah, that's
but I
good.
also try and make sure that I'm giving people a little bit of advice and challenging myself to be very intentional every day with my faith.
Yeah, that's good. And the fact that what I love, especially about your ministry, is that are you retired now or are you still in the workplace?
Well, I'm working on this.
Okay. So this is your full-time work now.
Yes.
You didn't stop pastoring, you didn't stop ministering just because you retired. You
No.
continue to do your work even, and that's biblical. I don't see retirement from ministry in the Bible anywhere. Upon
Yeah.
his death, Jesus like, okay, I give it to you now. And he's going back to heaven to prepare a place for us, so to speak, going back to build the kingdom, prepare the kingdom. So I love that about you, that you haven't stopped working. You continue to work for the kingdom and build the kingdom and center everything on Jesus. You're not making it about you. I mean, I look at your website here. I don't see big old pictures of you or 5 steps of how you're the hero of their story or any of that. I mean, it's all pointing back to Jesus there. I love that.
Yeah.
And so I love the idea with your podcast. And you've also got a blog. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, and so the blog actually was the way that I was communicating with people until I started podcasting. But we have a writer, a young lady named Takoi Bell,
Mm-hmm.
and we're open to other authors if they want to join us.
Uh-huh.
But we concentrate primarily on publishing content that's designed to help people be very intentional with their faith on a daily basis. And Takoi writes at least one article a week, and we every now and again we'll have some guest authors, and
Mm-hmm.
we'd like to grow that more. We're inviting people to enter in this dialogue,
Right.
either in written word or in podcast form.
Right.
We actually share all these resources through our online community as well, because
Mm-hmm.
we want believers to connect with one another by occupation and industry.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for the salespeople to get together and the truck drivers to get together and help each other figure out how they're going to live their faith, because I don't know how to do it in every occupation.
Right.
My challenge is for all of us to be asking the Holy Spirit and then doing what he says.
That's good. Yeah, I'm looking here also on your website, and you've got interviews. So you got several interviews. The first one that caught my attention, Mentoring Generations of Biblical Leaders with Todd Melby, episode
Mm-hmm.
157. And that is a passion of mine because I find that this generation, especially Gen Z, and I'm not saying, if you're listening to this podcast and you're one of the other generations, I'm not saying you're open, but I find within Generation Z, and I've got two children, one's 19, one's 16, and their generation seems to be especially open to the message of Jesus, to that, maybe not necessarily open to the institution of the church, but they are absolutely open to the message of Jesus because they've tried the YouTube fame. They've tried the social influencer route. They've seen other generations, and they basically seen those generations come to the end of themselves and recognize that no matter how many likes or followers you have, it's never going to fill that void that is present in their life. They may not even know what it is, but they are desperate for older people to invest into their lives, not for the purpose of necessarily saving them, but simply building those cross-generational relationships, being authentic in who they are. They don't need you to come in preaching to them. They've been sold to and marketed to more than any other generation on the planet because they've been online their entire lives. And
Mm-hmm.
even Twitter now, you can't go on Twitter without 1,000 ads popping up, or what's it called now?
Mm-hmm.
X. You can't go on X now without 1,000 ads popping up when you go on there.
Mm-hmm.
This generation is very skeptical of marketing, but that one-on-one connection they're desperate for. So I love that you're also going and interviewing others, and that message of mentoring the next generations. And I'm working on a book that's entitled Mentor Me, Shaping the Faith of the Next Generation, Shaping the Christian Identity of the Next Generation. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So cool there. Love what you're doing, man. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Your website, followerofone.org, is there. And I guess it looks like people can make donations. I mean, I know just from doing this that, online's not free just because it's online. You may not necessarily charge money for what you do, but it certainly costs you money. So people can make a donation there if they believe in your vision or mission. But by the way, what is your vision and mission? What do you think? What is that for your ministry there?
So my vision is that everyone would know 3 or 4 Christians who were living this kind of life, who are living this Jesus first life, where we're investing in other people because of the joy that we get from obeying Jesus. I believe it's going to take 3 or 4 people for someone to realize this. But I'd love to have thousands of people in our online community connecting with one another and creating these great ideas. We do 2 other things that we didn't really talk about. One is our marketplace mission trip. What we do is we challenge people to go to their own job for 2 weeks, like they're going on an overseas mission trip. And we're about ready to start number 29 of those. We've had 720 people do it. We've also done 6 of these with other churches, with 4 other churches. And we're doing these with churches. So we're offering this marketplace mission trip idea to pastors or to churches as a way to help kind of energize their congregation. We have a small church doing this next week here in the Tulsa area, but we've had about over 720 people do the mission trip, take the mission trip. We get feedback from a really smaller percentage than I thought, probably around 20 or 25%, but all the feedback is positive. What I think happens is, and I've talked to a lot of people who have done this, is we get surprised by how hard it is for us to get more intentional with our faith than we already are. Our environment kind of tricks us into the same way. We get buried at work and we do the same things. And so the marketplace mission trip is a way for us to challenge ourselves out of that. It's a 2-week exercise. And then once people either join the community or take the marketplace mission trip, we challenge them, if it's beneficial to them, to donate so that someone else can do it. Because we consider that if you pray, the first prayer we talk about is, here I am, punching in. Here I am, Jesus, what do you want me to do today? 2 sentences and you're on the mission field. And so how much harder can we make it? Or how would I charge people for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just tell Jesus, okay, here I am. What do you want me to do next? And you're on a mission trip.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, my full-time job is I work with a company by the name of Marketplace Chaplaincy. And
Yes.
so it was founded by Gil Strickland, who actually passed away 2 days ago now. And he's the founder of it. But he recognized, very similar to what you did, that after he was a chaplain in the Army, he got out of the Army, went into the marketplace, and began to recognize that just because it wasn't a church didn't mean that there wasn't needs that didn't
right.
exist there. And so one thing led to another, and he ended up founding Marketplace Ministry. So I get the opportunity to go into the marketplace every day, chicken plants, excavating companies out in the field where they're, grading and paving for houses and things like that. I've got a company who makes those big culverts, those big drain pipes that you put in ditches and stuff. Just a broad spectrum of that. I get the privilege of walking in and connecting with people every day. Very similar thing of what you're talking about there. You're essentially turning people into chaplains as they go. They may not have that role, may not have that title, but you don't have to have that title, right? I mean, we get stuck in titles there. So I love that. Now, you said 2 things. So you said the marketplace ministry trip or marketplace mission trip. What was the other thing that we haven't talked about?
So the other thing is how we're making that mission trip available to
Okay.
churches.
All right.
So a church can do this. We believe this. And what we've seen, there have been we've had 4 churches do this so far. We've seen the churches, to the degree that people get involved, they sense new energy and new excitement about their faith. We have a church that's starting this on Sunday as we record this. And it's a smaller church, but a pretty good sized chunk of their congregation is going. And so I'm excited to see how we experience this and what kind of excitement happens in their work, in their congregation, because of the opportunities that we try and give people. The stuff that we talk about in Follower of One is not rocket science, but it is packaged in such a way that that's very easy for us to do, because Follower of One for me is what can I do focus, not what I do. And so we try and make this as simple as possible. We believe that Jesus has a job for every one of us, and that job can't be something that I'm unable to do today.
That's good. I love that you're partnering with churches. It's almost like you're training churches to be intentional about doing ministry, recognizing the fact that it doesn't just happen. Ministry doesn't happen, never intended to just happen on Sunday morning inside the church building itself. That's good. Well, Mike, it's been great having you on here.
Thank you, Jeff.
Certainly want to continue to echo your voice throughout the internet there, throughout the world. Just you are doing God's work. Absolutely. You're building the kingdom, and that's good to hear. Followerofone.org is the name of the website there. I encourage you to go to the website, join the community there, partner with Mike, tell your pastor about this, get him to go and this website and contact Mike there. And just because we need this, we absolutely, the biggest mission field that we have in the United States of America right now is the marketplace. And so I should say everybody, most people work. So it's good to have that. Thanks again, brother. And you have a great day. You can be a co-creator with God by helping to echo our voices. Share our episodes with friends and family and on your own social media accounts. Give us positive 5-star reviews. The more positive reviews we have, the more visibility we have, and the more voices that are echoed through eternity. We often invite guests who are serving faithfully year after year, often in anonymity in their respective roles in ministries. God sees them, and the reality is for a good kingdom leader, that's enough. We do not do what we do for the accolades of humanity. We do it because we're called by God. But I believe that God uses people like you and I to continue those reverberations and echo them throughout eternity. You can partner with God by liking, subscribing, or writing a quick positive 5-star review, and again, sharing those voices with friends and family and on your own social media accounts. Those reviews will eventually lead to other guests who have larger platforms that have more listeners who will then in turn listen to the show. And again, it further echoes those voices, which is the whole vision of the Echoes Through Eternity podcast here, is to continue echoing those voices that God is echoing through eternity there.